The live stream is up. You guys are ready? Yeah, that's right. You all up?
1 second.
Live stream up? Yeah. You guys ready? Yep. Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to take a couple moments today to talk about two issues. One is my response to the governor's announcement today regarding COVID, and secondly, to talk about tonight's City Council agenda, where we are taking up what I believe to be the beginning of systemic police reform. Let me begin with the COVID-related issue. My response to the governor's announcement is that it is both unfortunate and necessary. Unfortunate because we were on a path, I think, to continue to reopen Sacramento and California in a way that would allow more people to continue to work, more small businesses to remain open, and to return to, some level of what we all once considered normal life. Necessary because the virus itself is unpredictable, silent, and real, and at the same time unfortunate. I think, at least to some degree, we have more power to affect the outcome, and too many people are not following the public health guidelines. And certainly the 4th of July is right around the corner. I know every 4th of July I have looked forward to the Pocket Parade and the East Sac Parade and all the other great community events that won't be happening this year, appropriately so. But I am still very concerned that people are going to, take advantage of the holiday and the warm weather, and that they are going to gather in large settings, or even in relatively large settings, and that the spike is going to continue. And that is just plain irresponsible, because you see the impact on people. Think about all the restaurant workers now who are going to once again be laid off or temporarily furloughed, because we now have to close restaurants, at least indoor dining. And so the governor's message, I know, has been very clear, and I think he's taking the appropriate action. And my message as the mayor of this city is everything that we can control, we need to be responsible. Every way that we can ensure that this virus does not spike more than its natural course, we need to do what is necessary. And if that means some inconvenience because the 4th of July is going to be a different holiday than what we're used to, so be it. Inconvenience and comfort does not compare to people getting sick, to people dying, to people ending up in the hospital, and to the economic damage that is created when we have to take a significant step backwards. So let the 4th of July be a statement by the people of Sacramento that we are going to do everything we can to reverse this most recent trend and to get back to where we were a couple of weeks ago when we were charting a much more positive trajectory. And what does mean? No large gatherings, no semi-large gatherings, being conscious about social distancing and physical distancing, and wearing the darn masks. I mean, how many times do people have to say it? And I know I took my mask off now because I'm speaking to you, but I wear my mask in all the important and right ways. That it's an easy thing to do, and it helps keep people safe. So that's that. I'll be happy to answer, of course, any of your questions. Of course, dealing with one crisis at a time is not the way of the world, and not the way of Sacramento. Certainly not the life of a big city mayor. For I have talked about and written and a lot about our need to be leaders around systemic change. Tonight we have an opportunity, I think, to show the people of Sacramento, whether we do convince everyone or not is certainly not my goal, because in this job I never believe that you can make, quote, everyone happy. But I want our city to be on the forefront of the change. And so, to reiterate, tonight we're going to take up two major proposals. One is to forevermore have independent review when it comes to officer-involved shootings, when it comes to deaths in custody, and when it comes to any use of force that results in serious bodily injury for any resident in Sacramento, to make sure to begin the process of hiring an inspector general in Sacramento with full independence and with the responsibility in each of those categories to investigate any incident and to publicly report his or her findings, conclusions, and recommendations for officer discipline if appropriate. And then, timing-wise, while the city manager would retain full independent authority to make the final decision, to ensure that the manager has access to all of the publicly available information, including the inspector general, and to thus not make a decision on discipline until that recommendation from the general is out there in the public. The second proposal, I think, represents even more potential for systemic reform. The defund movement has been translated in many different ways by people. Some people say you should tear down the police department and you should start from scratch. I don't think that is practical or appropriate. Some people have said you ought to actually remove a significant amount of responsibility and function from the police department to reduce the potential for violent interactions. And it's on this pillar, not exclusively, because there are many other things I'm open to and many other things we should consider, but it's on this pillar that we begin our systemic change in Sacramento. And let me tell you, I have a particular background in this area. I'm the author of California's Mental Health Services Act, Millionaire's Tax in California, generating billions of dollars for mental health care throughout California. And it's been a lifetime passion of mine because I believe mental health is the unaddressed issue of our time. We always talk about fixing the system. Well, here is a new opportunity to try to help fix that system. For when you think about the thousands of calls that police officers are called upon to take through our 911 system that don't involve an underlying claim or concern about a violent crime. And we have an opportunity to shift many calls from a police response to a non-law enforcement response. Mental health, by the way, is just one example. There's homelessness. Tonight we're going to have a very robust discussion about what those categories could be. And then I'm going to ask the city manager and the police chief to actually come back within a relatively short period of time with even greater granular detail about what calls might be on one side of the line or the other. And by the way, it's not all one or the other, because there are some calls, for example, that police officers may even when we make the change appropriately respond to, that they don't have to respond to for as long, or they don't have to respond to over and over again. Domestic violence is a pretty good example. It's a crime. And so a police response where there's an active incident of domestic violence, of course, is appropriate. But if we engage our new office and our community partners like the Family Justice Center and others to actually do a warm handoff from police to an alternative way of addressing a situation where appropriate. The police don't have to be involved as long. So how does this relate to money? If the police department does not have to respond to the same number of calls and does not have to respond with the same amount of time for particular calls that they're now responding to, we have the opportunity then to shift those resources to a new city department, which I don't know what we will call it, and I'm not the brand guy, but I would call it, you know, the Office of Community Response. The Office of Community Response. We shift those resources to that new office of non-law enforcement personnel, and we have them handle both the initial call or the earlier or the warm handoff, so that the police don't have to be involved as much. What will the end result be? The end result will be a shifting of police resources to some of the very issues that the community is crying out for more resources and more attention. Things I have worked my life trying to build up, like a better mental health system in Sacramento and in California. Tonight, I expect that the City Council will direct the City Manager to approve $5 million to get started with this new Office of Community Response now, over the next weeks. And secondly, the City Manager will soon appoint an interim director of this new department or unit. So those will be two tangible steps that I hope will demonstrate to the people that we are serious about systemic reform. Not the end of the story, not the middle of the story, but I believe a very strong beginning and a very strong commitment. I know people are going to be, and I'm glad that people are going to be participating, and there are a lot of people who are going to have different opinions about these questions on all sides. Some are going to say, unless you absolutely defund, that they're never going to be satisfied. I accept the fact that that if you're trying to do public policy change and systemic change that is thoughtful, that your job is not to please everyone. Your job is to always do what you believe to be the right thing. I have, as I wrote yesterday in the Sacramento Bee, I am thinking more deeply than I ever have before about these issues, and recognize that all of us have a responsibility to see the world a little or a lot different than we saw the world previously, and to respond in ways that are meaningful, that attempt to remedy the gross inequities that exist in our society and in our communities. This is one step, one very important step, and I look forward to the discussion tonight. Happy to answer your questions.
Yeah, could you run us through the timeline? Could you run us through the timeline of the next steps, assuming the sun passed tonight, because I don't know overwhelmed?
Well, two immediate steps. One is we will authorize the manager to find $5 million so that we can begin putting together a budget to stand up this unit. And secondly, I believe the manager will be ready within the next days to appoint a director of this department. Then within the next, I would say 30 to 45 days, we will come back with a much more granular, detailed discussion about the calls, because it's the calls that sort of drive the shift. Again, I want to do this aggressively, but I want to do this thoughtfully.
Mayor, we also already have the DA who's supposed to investigate officer-involved shootings and such, unbiasedly. And we also have the Office of Public Safety Accountability. I'm wondering if you can comment on why we need this new Inspector General position. If we already have those, and if they're doing their job properly, do we need this new one?
Well, first of all, I should clarify, and I appreciate the opportunity to clarify. that the new Inspector General will be within the office. It'll be a new function within the Office of Public Safety Accountability. The Office of Public Safety Accountability has traditionally looked at policies and has been more of an internal back and forth between the police and fire department and the community. The Inspector General is obviously going to be a very public position with a specific responsibility to investigate every incident under the 3 categories that I mentioned earlier. The district attorney, of course, is responsible for potential criminal prosecution, not for discipline or discharge of an officer. So the DA's job is different. I should mention as well, though, tonight, that on the agenda, I'm going to ask the council to formally endorse, I believe it's Assembly Bill 1156. I may have the number wrong. It's the Kevin McCarty bill that would shift DA responsibility for officer-involved shootings to the Attorney General. Because I don't think the DA should be investigating officer-involved shootings and misconduct. I just don't. I think it's too close, and I think it needs to be removed. And so I strongly support the McCarty bill as one potential pathway to look at the prosecution question in a place other than here across the street. I hope that helps.
When it comes to this new position, there are lots of those within the Black and brown community that say they're not going to be able to trust anybody that's appointed, and they want some kind of say in this person that's being appointed. What would you say to those people to help ease their minds and hopefully maybe trust this whole process?
Well, I think that we ultimately, the hiring decision is by the city and by specifically Letitia Watson, who is our new Office of Public Safety and Accountability Director. But I would completely support, and in fact will encourage her to have an open community process so that the public does have a voice and some say in who gets hired into this position. I think that's very important, especially in this time. Anything else? I think so. Hi. Yes. You want me to answer that one first? Okay. So I want to be clear because it's I don't want to oversell and I don't want to undersell. The Inspector General will have the right and the responsibility to do an independent investigation and to publicly articulate his or her findings, conclusions, and recommendations for discipline, if any. The ultimate decision whether or not to proceed with the discipline will be the independent judgment of the city manager. But the point here is obvious, that the way the system currently works is that Internal Affairs does an investigation. If there's an accusation of underlying criminal conduct by the officer, the police department will do its investigation. The DA may do an investigation. The city manager will ultimately determine the discipline, but there's no independent oversight and no independent investigation prior to any of those decisions being made. And that's what causes the lack of trust, is that it's all behind closed doors. Now, as I explained a couple of weeks ago, the state legislature opened the door for a change here back in July of 2018. Because what the state legislature said is that in 3 categories, officer-involved shootings, deaths in custody, and force which results in serious bodily injury, in those 3 categories, a city, any city or any county has the right to release any information, including personnel information, around any such incident. That's the open door. Prior to July of 2018, we could not have done this. And frankly, it took a little time to interpret 1421. So now we have a new opportunity here to say in these three categories, we want a full public investigation. But ultimately, the city manager will still make that decision and will have to use his independent judgment, taking in all of the information, including very public findings about what went down and what should happen. Yes.
One of the points of his press conference had to do with the question of enforcement and how that's handled. Monterey County actually announced that they're issuing a $1,000 fine for people not wearing face masks in public. Just wondering what your take is on enforcement, especially given that it's actually the California Sheriff essentially said this is not something they're looking to enforce. Nevertheless, the case is statewide, countywide.
So yes, I'm sorry.
So just at this point, would you explore any more forceful enforcement because we do continue to see a large number of people within Sacramento County without being arrested?
I will talk to the chief about this, but I'll give you my opinion, as I always do. Number one, you cannot enforce your way through these requirements. We just don't have enough law enforcement personnel, and there are real crimes out there. So you can't enforce your way through it. On the other hand, would I have any problem with people flagrantly violating the requirement over the 4th of July, gathering in big picnic areas, not wearing their mask? Would I have a problem with them being issued big fines? I would not. Because if that's what it takes to make an example and to show people that we're serious about this, I'd be just fine with that. Thank you. Well, so we have both police officers and I think in our city now, the COVID-related health orders are to be enforced by our code enforcement officers, not our police officers. Again, it's something I'm going to talk about. Again, I want to be clear. You're not going to be able to enforce your way through every violation. It's just not realistic. But on the other hand, this weekend, if there are people flagrantly violating it and our code enforcement folks see them flagrantly violating it, I would have no problem with enforcement in an appropriate and real way. People are sick and dying. People are getting sick and people are dying. I see people in our ICUs. When I see what's happening throughout the state, this is damn serious. And it needs to be seen that way. And if that includes some enforcement by example, where people are being flagrant about it in large settings, and it helps, I'd be okay with it. Thank you.
That's a separate topic. What, 2 of your colleagues were targets of vandalism throughout the morning.
And I had protests at midnight at my house with lights flashing through my home and loud noise and all that. Yes.
Just wondering if get your take on that and what you're hoping people will do to hopefully not target you guys.
You know, I have such mixed feelings about it. I probably should not comment. I respect people's right to peacefully assemble. Always have, always will. And I certainly acknowledge and respect the passion and the anger that is out there. I just want everyone to be safe. Want everyone to be safe. Thank you. See you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.